Before there were cities, before kings, before temples, before anyone decided taxes was somehow a good idea, there was simply night and a fire and people sitting close enough to survive it. Before we begin, if you're listening from somewhere far away, maybe under a blanket, maybe half awake, maybe pretending tomorrow does not exist for a little while, tell me in the comments where you're from and what time it is there right now. I always like imagining these stories traveling quietly across different nights, finding people in different corners of the world. And if you enjoy these long journeys through history, you can leave a like, subscribe if you'd like, but only if it feels right. No pressure. Ancient humans had enough pressure already. Now, imagine your life without walls. No locked door, no city outside, no road, no electric light, no certainty that morning will arrive the way you expect. Just darkness, cold air, and the very honest knowledge that something out there might be stronger than you. For most of human existence, this was normal, not dramatic, normal. People today talk about human history and usually begin with Egypt or Rome or perhaps Greece, because apparently history only becomes respectable once someone starts building columns. But for nearly 100,000 years before civilization, humans were already fully human. They loved, they argued, they raised children, they buried their dead. They stared into firelight and wondered what waited beyond it. They were not waiting for civilization to invent them. They already existed. That may be the strangest truth of all. A woman in prehistoric Africa, sitting beside a small fire, watching her child sleep, worrying about tomorrow's food, missing someone who did not return, that woman is closer to you than most emperors in textbooks. She would understand your fear faster than a king would, because history is not built from crowns. It is built from ordinary discomfort. Cold feet, hunger, bad sleep. Someone in the group being impossible for no clear reason. This is the real foundation of civilization, not glory. Management. Imagine waking before sunrise in a small camp somewhere in East Africa. The air is cool. Ash still breathes softly from last night's fire. Someone is already awake because humans have always included at least one person who treats sleep as a suspicious luxury. Children are still curled in blankets of hide. An elder coughs. A dog, if we are late enough in time for dogs. And honestly, they probably arrived exactly when humans needed emotional support lifts its head, decides nothing is urgent, and returns to sleep with impressive professionalism. There is no breakfast waiting politely in a kitchen. Food is not stored in bright packages. Food is a question. Will there be roots today? Fruit? Fish? A successful hunt? Or one of those deeply spiritual days where everyone calls hunger patience. Every morning begins with uncertainty, and uncertainty shapes personality. People who live close to uncertainty become good at reading small signs. Clouds, bird movement, animal tracks, the smell of water, the silence where sound should be. The body becomes an instrument. You listen with your skin. You trust patterns. You notice when the world feels slightly wrong. That instinct never left us. It is why a strange silence in your house at night can still feel like a threat. Your body remembers older rules, and the group matters. This is important. No one survives alone. The modern fantasy of independence would have looked ridiculous in deep prehistory. A person alone is not romantic. A person alone is a problem. Who helps when you are sick? Who watches while you sleep? Who remembers where water remains in dry season? Who carries you when your ankle decides it no longer supports your life choices? Humans survived because we were inconveniently attached to one another. We cared, even when it was exhausting, especially then. Belonging was not emotional decoration. It was survival. To be rejected by the group was not embarrassment. It was danger. That is why shame still feels physical. Your nervous system treats exclusion like a survival threat, because, for most of history, it was one. We are still built for small circles, for faces we know, for voices we trust, not for thousands of strangers and unread emails. Prehistoric people did not have inbox anxiety. In some ways, I envy them. In other ways, I absolutely do not, because life was hard, cold was hard, injury was hard, pregnancy was dangerous, children died, people disappeared. A small cut could become a very serious philosophical discussion with infection, and yet there was beauty. This matters. People did not only survive, they decorated. A shell bead, red ochre on skin, a necklace made of teeth, a careful braid, beauty before luxury, meaning before comfort. A person wearing a shell far from the sea was saying something. I belong. I remember. I matter. Even before writing, humans wanted to leave evidence of themselves. The cave handprint and the modern photograph are not so different. Both say the same thing. I was here. Please remember that. And there was fire. Always fire. Fire was not just warmth. It was law, safety, center, a thin orange border between order and the excellent bad intentions of the wilderness. Inside the firelight, names, food, children, stories. Outside it, teeth and darkness. Night was never just night. Darkness meant imagination getting a full-time job. A sound becomes a shape becomes danger. Danger becomes a story, and the story survives longer than the animal. Do not sleep near that cave. Why? Because once, long ago, that sentence built half of human culture. Warnings became myths. Temporary solutions became sacred rules. Do not whistle at night. Do not mock the sea. Do not sleep under that tree. Nobody remembers who made the rule. Only that someone once ignored it and everyone had a terrible week. This is how early law worked. Not in books, in consequences, and perhaps that is what life before civilization really was. Repetition. Walking, watching, sharing, arguing, returning, always returning. Home was not a building. Home was a pattern. The valley visited each spring. The cave used only when winter became rude. The river crossing where your grandmother always complained. The place where someone was buried. The place where everyone walked a little quieter. That was home, not walls. Memory. People moved because they had to, because animals moved, because water changed, because staying still could be just as dangerous as leaving. Maybe it is better over there. That sentence pushed humanity across continents. Sometimes it led to abundance. Sometimes it led to a blizzard and immediate regret. But people kept walking across coastlines, across forests, across cold open lands where the wind felt personally offended by your existence. They walked because survival is often just choosing which discomfort feels less fatal. And through all of it, through hunger, migration, love, winter, fear, and the occasional deeply suspicious stranger smiling near camp humans kept doing one strange thing. They kept believing tomorrow might be better. That may be our oldest religion. Hope, not grand hope, not heroic hope, practical hope. Enough food for one more season. A child surviving the fever. A better hunting ground beyond the hill. A winter with enough firewood. A person returning, mourning. Civilization did not invent hope. It inherited it. The same way it inherited fear. The same way it inherited love. Everything we call modern rests on something much older, because before history had monuments, it had people. Before laws, there was trust. Before religion, there was grief. Before kings, there was someone everyone listened to when things went wrong. And before civilization, there was already humanity. Tired, cold, beautiful, sitting close to the fire, listening to the dark, waiting for morning. There is something strangely modern about leaving home. People today announce it dramatically. They post photographs in airports, write emotional captions, and pretend the universe personally arranged their new beginning. For most of human history, leaving home meant something much simpler. You walked, no road, no suitcase, no map, no sign promising food ahead. Just feet, children, tools, and the dangerous sentence that has moved humanity more than almost anything else. Maybe it is better over there. That sentence is older than civilization, older than kings, older than written lies. Maybe it is better over there. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was absolutely not. This is the mistake people make when they imagine early human migration. They picture heroic explorers standing on cliffs, staring nobly into the horizon like they are applying for a documentary. Reality was less elegant. Someone noticed there were fewer animals this season. The river had become smaller. Another group had started using the same hunting ground. The old path no longer worked. Children kept getting sick near that water. Or perhaps grief itself made a place feel impossible. Sometimes people leave because survival demands it. Sometimes they leave because memory makes staying unbearable. A place where someone died can become heavier than geography. Humans are practical, but never only practical. We carry emotion like another form of weather, so a group moves. Not all at once. Migration was rarely one dramatic departure. It was slow enough that nobody inside it fully understood it was history. A family joins relatives farther away for one season. A young woman leaves with another group and does not return. A hunting route stretches farther than usual. A drought becomes a habit. A coastline offers easier food, and suddenly inland begins to feel like a previous life. Children born there may never know the original place their grandparents still describe. They hear stories of a valley with better trees, a river full of birds, a place where rain smelled different. To them, it sounds almost mythical. Home becomes a story before it becomes a destination. That is one of the quiet sadnesses of deep time. You can lose your homeland slowly enough that nobody notices the exact day it disappeared. And still, people kept walking. The world outside familiar land was not adventure. It was ignorance. That is what a new landscape really is. Ignorance. You do not know which plants are safe. You do not know where water hides when the season turns cruel. You do not know which cave is empty and which cave belongs to something with teeth and a strong opinion about visitors. You do not know how fast the river rises. You do not know which insects bite and which insects simply insult. Even the sounds are wrong. Bird calls unfamiliar. Wind moving through different trees. Silence where there should be noise. Noise where there should be silence. The body notices unfamiliarity before the mind explains it. Something feels wrong. Sleep becomes lighter. Every shadow becomes a question. People stepping into unknown land were not discovering it like heroic explorers. They were negotiating with uncertainty, and uncertainty is exhausting. Imagine reaching the sea for the first time. The smell arrives before the water. Salt, rot, wet wind, birds shouting with unnecessary confidence. And then the sea itself, too large, too alive, refusing to behave like a river. For inland people, the ocean must have felt almost supernatural. It moved like a living thing. It offered food and danger with equal enthusiasm. Shellfish, fish, bird eggs, driftwood, strange gifts. And humans, unfortunately, have always had a dangerous relationship with things that look abundant, because abundance creates confidence. Confidence creates stupidity. And the sea is extremely patient with stupidity. Someone gathers shellfish too far from shore. Someone trusts calm water. Someone sleeps too low on the beach because the sand looks peaceful. Someone follows something beautiful into a place where beauty has no interest in protecting them. The sea teaches one lesson repeatedly. Beauty is not safety. So people learn rhythm. Tides become a clock. Bird movement becomes warning. Moonlight becomes instruction. And temporary solutions become permanent rules. Do not cross after that shadow reaches the rock. Do not gather shellfish there in warm weather. Do not laugh at the sea. Nobody may remember who made the rule. Only that someone once ignored it, and the story became expensive enough to survive. This is prehistoric law, not written, remembered. And then there were mountains. Mountains are honest in a way civilization rarely is. They do not care if your intentions are good. A mountain path can be beautiful and still kill you before lunch. Cold comes faster. Wind becomes personal. A misstep becomes everyone's problem. Children must be watched constantly. Old injuries wake up and begin making speeches. And yet people cross them, because on the other side, maybe it is better over there. There is that sentence again. It follows humanity like a ghost. In colder lands, life changed shape. Cold is not just temperature. Cold is administration. It enters every decision. Can the fire survive the night? Are the hides dry enough? Can the baby sleep without shaking? Can fingers still work? Can we afford to stop moving? Can we afford not to? Cold makes small failures feel like betrayal. Wetness becomes almost moral. A wet cloak is not bad luck. It is an argument with death. And fire becomes sacred. Not poetic first. Practical first. Without it, people die. That creates seriousness. Someone careful with fire becomes valuable. Someone careless with fire becomes unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. There were probably prehistoric stories that were essentially just very old versions of, "Do not let him near the important things." Some humans are eternal. Food changed too. In cold places, fat mattered more than modern people instinctively understand. Today, people say the word fat with too much emotion. In deep prehistory, fat meant warmth, strength, winter, survival. A successful hunt was not only meat, it was marrow, organs, richness. The difference between feeling full and actually being able to continue living Cracking bones for marrow was not desperation. It was intelligence. And around every successful hunt came the oldest political system in history. Who gets what? The hunter who made the kill feels pride. The pregnant woman may need more. The elder reminds everyone that memory also deserves food. The child is hungry now, not philosophically later. Someone thinks the division is unfair. Someone is probably right. Sharing sounds noble from far away. Up close, it is politics wearing blood on its hands. This is where social rules become visible. A group that says, "we share," still has tension. Generosity can be moral. It can also be heavily supervised. A selfish person does not remain mysterious for long in a small camp. Reputation sticks like smoke. Without writing, without courts, without official law, gossip did most of the administrative work. He never shares. She remembers where the roots grow. He lies about hunting. That family cannot be trusted. This person stays calm when everyone else becomes stupid. That kind of reputation mattered. It was your history, your marriage proposal, your criminal record, and your social survival all at once. And then there were strangers. A stranger could bring beauty or disaster, stories, shells, new tools, marriage possibilities, useful gossip, or disease, violence, the kind of smile that makes everyone quietly move children closer. How do you approach strangers when there is no shared language, no embassy, and no polite email beginning with, "I hope this message finds you well"? Carefully, very carefully. Perhaps one person walks forward. Not the loudest person. That would be a terrible strategy across most of history. Someone calm, someone observant, someone who can smile without looking foolish. Weapons visible, but not too visible. Confidence, but not insult. Curiosity, but not stupidity. Human diplomacy probably began with very awkward walking. And then the oldest question, gift or trap, a shell offered in friendship, a good stone exchanged, a gesture understood correctly or incorrectly. That part matters because humans love believing they are being clear. Most historical disasters begin with that confidence. A hand movement means peace to one group and insult to another. A gift means alliance to one group and debt to another. A marriage offer means connection to one group and hostage-taking to another. And yet, exchange happened. Stone travelled. Shells travelled. Pigment travelled. Stories travelled farther than all of them. And so did people. Because humans were not alone. They met others. Other humans. Different, but not entirely. People who looked familiar and strange at the same time. Different faces, different tools, different sounds, different smells, certainly. Imagine that first meeting. Fear first, curiosity second. Maybe violence, maybe trade, maybe attraction, maybe all of it. History likes clean categories. Human life never provides them. Some meetings ended in stories. Some ended in children. Some ended in silence. And the world kept moving. That is the strange humility of deep time. Entire lives happened that left behind no names. Someone fell in love and no record remains. Someone lost a child and grief lived only in changed behavior. Someone told the funniest story anyone there had ever heard, and it disappeared with the laughter. Someone spent 10 years quietly annoyed by the same person near the fire. History kept none of it, and yet that is where life happened. Not in monuments, in repetition, walking, watching, carrying, repairing, returning, especially returning. A camp visited once is a stop. A camp visited again becomes identity. Home before houses may have been less a place and more a pattern of return. This valley in spring, that coast in summer. The cave only when winter becomes rude. The hill where someone is buried. The dangerous place everyone still avoids, even though nobody remembers why. That was home. Not fixed walls, familiar repetition. And from repetition came something powerful. Belonging. Not the spear, not even fire. Belonging. The invisible agreement that says, you are one of us. And therefore your hunger matters to me. And unfortunately, so do your opinions. Because belonging is beautiful, but it is never quiet. It asks things from people. Share, wait, protect, obey, remember, forgive, stay, leave, return, and sometimes, the hardest thing of all, trust. Trust that the person watching the fire will stay awake. Trust that the stranger means peace. Trust that the old path still leads to water. Trust that if you fall, someone will slow down. Trust that if you die, someone will remember where to place you. Trust that over there might really be better. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was not. But humans kept walking anyway. Across coastlines, through forests, over cold plains, into caves, out of old homes, towards stories not yet told. And somewhere, in all that movement, without realizing it, they were building the world. There is a strange mistake people make when they imagine prehistory. They picture survival, but forget affection. They imagine hunting, but forget tenderness. They see stone tools, but not the quiet moment when someone wakes in the night and pulls a hide a little higher over a sleeping child. As if love was invented later, somewhere between agriculture and very disappointing poetry. But of course it was there. It had to be, because no child survives alone. No injury heals well in isolation. No grief becomes bearable without witnesses. Humans did not become successful because we were individually strong. We became dangerous because we were emotionally inconvenient for one another. We cared, even when it was impractical. Especially then. And that is where life becomes complicated. Because love is never just warmth. Love is obligation. Love is jealousy. Love is fear. Love is staying awake longer than you want because someone else is coughing. Love is giving the best piece of food to someone and pretending you were not hungry anyway. Love is also, unfortunately, listening. Imagine a camp at night. The fire has settled lower now. The loud flames of evening have become quieter, just red light breathing in the dark. Most people are sleeping badly. Nobody in deep time slept beautifully. Sleep was negotiation. Someone turns. Someone snores with real commitment. A child mutters in a dream. Outside the circle of warmth, something moves, and then decides not to ruin everyone's night. Beside you, someone you care about is finally asleep. Maybe they are exhausted. Maybe pregnant. Maybe sick. Maybe simply tired. In the ordinary human way that needs no dramatic explanation. You shift slightly so the cold reaches you first. That is love. Not dramatic, not announced. Just the quiet redistribution of discomfort. That may be one of the oldest forms of romance. Before formal marriage, before ceremonies, before anyone spent too much money on flowers and family arguments, there were still bonds everyone understood. Who slept near who mattered. Who shared food mattered. Who protected whose child mattered. Who left camp and who returned mattered. Relationships were never private because privacy itself was limited. In a small group, affection affected everyone. If two people formed a bond, it changed sleeping arrangements, labor, childcare, alliances, and the emotional weather of the entire camp. Nothing is truly personal when everyone can hear your argument through a wall of branches. And people argued. This is important. Prehistoric love was not simpler than modern love. It was probably just harder to hide. Jealousy did not wait for civilization. Neither did betrayal. Neither did the deeply human ability to say, "I'm fine," in a tone that clearly means prepare for consequences. Attraction itself was practical and irrational at the same time. A good partner was not only someone beautiful. Beauty helps, of course. Humanity has never been immune to attractive bad decisions, but a valuable partner might be someone calm under pressure, someone good with children, someone who remembered useful things, someone who stayed kind when hungry, which may be one of the highest qualifications in all of history. Someone funny. Do not underestimate humor. A person who can make others laugh during difficult times becomes socially powerful. Survival respects competence. Affection often chooses warmth. And then there was smell. Romantic history almost never discusses smell, which is dishonest. People in deep time smelled like smoke, animal hide, sweat, wet earth, blood after butchery, and weather. They smelled like the places they lived. Attraction existed inside that reality, not despite it. Someone's familiar smell may have meant safety. Smoke in their hair, cold air in old fur, presence. Love is often less poetic and more specific than people admit. It is not, "I love humanity." It is, "I know the sound of your footsteps." It is, "I notice when you are quieter than usual." It is, "I can tell you are sick before you speak." And because humans love, humans fear loss. Pregnancy must have been one of the most powerful and frightening experiences in prehistoric life. No hospitals. No bright clean rooms pretending to be comforting. No certainty. Only the body. Pain. Waiting. And the terrifying knowledge that childbirth could go wrong for mother, child, or both. And still women gave birth. Again and again. Not because it was safe, because life insists. Pregnancy changed everything. Movement, food, protection, group decisions. Can she walk that far? Who carries more? Who stays close? Who gives up the better sleeping place? A pregnant woman was never only an individual condition. Her body changed the structure of the group. And after birth, survival did not become easier. It became louder. Babies are beautiful. Babies are also tiny, unpredictable alarms with astonishing dedication to poor timing. A baby crying at night is not only exhausting, it is dangerous. It attracts attention. It breaks sleep. It pulls adults between tenderness and panic. A sick child changes the entire emotional atmosphere of camp. People listen differently. Work becomes distracted. Hope becomes superstition very quickly. Someone says, "Try this plant." Someone says, "Do not let the child sleep yet." Someone paints the forehead with ochre. Someone sings. Someone prays, even if they do not yet have that word. This is where ritual often begins. Not from philosophy, from helplessness. When someone you love is suffering, humans will try almost anything. That is not primitive. That is permanent. Children were everywhere, because children are what time looks like when it refuses to stop. And childhood was not separate from life. There was no protected kingdom of childhood. Children lived near work, near blood, near fire, near grief, near adult exhaustion. They learned survival not through lessons, but through exposure. Do not touch that. Stay close. Be quiet now. Watch how I do this. Not that plant. Definitely not that cave. Children watched adults butcher animals. They watched arguments. They watched people carry the dead. They learned what frightened grown people. That may be the most important education any child receives. But they also played, because children will play in any century, under any sky, in almost any level of chaos. A child throwing sticks at imaginary animals is not wasting time. They are rehearsing competence. A child hiding behind rocks is learning movement. A child copying an adult scraping hide with a useless bone is learning rhythm, patience, and probably how boring important work can be. Play is training disguised as joy. And joy matters. People sometimes speak of prehistory as if laughter would have been disrespectful to survival. This is nonsense. Laughter is part of survival. Someone trips while trying to look impressive. A hunter returns empty-handed with a suspiciously detailed explanation involving wind, bad luck, and what was clearly a very disrespectful deer. People laughed. They must have, otherwise the whole species would have resigned. But alongside joy lived loss. Child mortality was not rare. Illness, infection, cold, accidents, water, animals, small things becoming large because no medicine arrived to interrupt them. A parent could love a child completely and still know survival was uncertain. That does not make love smaller. It makes it heavier. Imagine holding a feverish child through the night beside a failing fire. The body too warm, breathing wrong, every adult nearby pretending calm in a different way. One offers advice, one brings water, one says nothing, because silence feels kinder than false certainty, and mourning becomes a verdict. People assume frequent death makes grief smaller. It does not. Familiarity with death is not immunity to sorrow. It may even sharpen it, because every parent knows exactly what is being lost. Not an idea, a voice, a habit. The way a child runs badly, the question they asked every day, the future version of them that will now never arrive. Grief existed long before names were written, and death itself was never only emotional. A body demands decision. That sounds harsh, but it is true. A corpse is someone loved, and also a problem. It smells. It draws animals. It frightens children. It changes the feeling of a place. It asks, now what? Bury, cover, burn where possible. Move camp, return later. Every choice says something. And perhaps the first burial customs began not from religion, but from the unbearable need to place someone somewhere. Put them here, not there. Here, close enough to remember, far enough to survive. Then later, someone returns. A stone is placed. A tool is left. A child is told not to shout near that place. Now the ground has changed. It is no longer just land. It is memory. And memory becomes sacred very quickly. This may be one of the oldest holy acts. Not prayer, placement. The decision that this person mattered enough for the earth itself to keep them. Children watching this would learn death before explanation. Why can't she come back? Where did he go? Why do adults whisper here? Adults answered with the best tool humans have always had. Story. Maybe the dead travel. Maybe they remain nearby. Maybe dreams are visits. Maybe grief invents religion because the alternative is silence. And silence is difficult when love has been real. Old age looked different too. An elder was proof of survival. They carried scars, memory, authority, irritation, and often the extraordinary ability to repeat warnings until younger people briefly considered exile. But they mattered. An elder remembered where water remained during the worst drought, which family once betrayed trust, which plant heals pain, and which plant creates a much faster and more dramatic kind of silence. They were living maps, living law. But caring for elders was not always easy. This is where sentimental history lies. Yes, elders were respected. Also, yes, elders could be slower, hungry, stubborn, and expensive in terms of energy. In a hard winter, compassion becomes heavy. Do we slow down for him? Do we carry her, Father? Do we give the best food to the person who no longer hunts? Love becomes sharp when resources are thin. Character appears when there is only enough for almost everyone. And yet evidence suggests people were cared for. Broken bones healed. Disabled people survived. Old people remained. That means someone stayed. Someone fed them. Someone chose inconvenience over efficiency. That choice matters. It means humanity did not survive by strength alone. We survived by making weakness a shared problem. That may be civilization before civilization, not buildings. Responsibility. Pain shaped life constantly. Burns. Smoke in the eyes. Bad teeth. Old fractures. Coughing through cold nights. Skin cracking in winter. The slow humiliation of a body refusing to cooperate. Pain changes personality. A person in pain becomes quieter, or angrier, or funnier, or impossible, and everyone around them adjusts. This is another forgotten truth of history. Most of human life happened while someone's back hurt, not during battles, during ordinary discomfort. And through all of this, people still wanted beauty. A shell bead, a necklace, pigment on skin, care taken with hair. Decoration is often treated as luxury. It is closer to identity. I belong. I survived. I am mourning. I am chosen. I matter. Beauty is social language. Even a simple ornament says, I am more than hunger. That matters, because prehistory was never only survival. It was meaning. A person painting a body before ritual, or placing a hand on cave stone, was not waiting for civilization to make them human. They already were. They had jealousy. They had loyalty. They had grief strong enough to change landscapes. They had children asking impossible questions. They had lovers sleeping badly beside them. They had old people telling stories everyone pretended not to need. They had arguments about fairness. They had quiet forgiveness. They had people they missed. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part. If you walked into one of those camps at night, the thing that would disturb you most might not be how different they were. It might be how familiar. Someone trying to keep a child asleep. Someone annoyed at someone else for very reasonable reasons. Someone falling in love with the wrong person. Someone staring into firelight, thinking about someone who is gone. Someone hoping tomorrow will be easier. That is us. Long before cities, long before writing, long before history decided who deserved remembering, the human heart was already doing exactly what it still does now, attaching itself to fragile things and refusing, despite all evidence, to stop. Night was never just night. That is the first thing to understand. Modern people talk about darkness as if it is decorative, a mood, something for candles, soft music, and regrettable decisions made after midnight. But for most of human existence, darkness was not peaceful. Darkness was a loss of power. It meant your eyes stopped being useful, and humans trust their eyes far more than they should. When light disappears, imagination finds employment immediately. A sound becomes a shape becomes a threat becomes a story. And sometimes the story survives longer than the animal that caused it. Before cities, before walls, before locks, before anyone invented the deeply suspicious idea of property taxes, night belonged to uncertainty. You could not see far. You could hear too much. The world beyond the edge of light became a negotiation between reality and fear. Imagine the camp after sunset. The work of the day is finished, or at least abandoned, in the very human way people politely describe as finished. The meat has been cut, the tools checked. The children have been told not to touch dangerous things approximately 400 times, which is the traditional number required before children feel truly loved. Now, the fire matters, not as comfort first, as survival. The flames are not decoration. They are a wall, a thin, flickering wall made of heat, smoke, light, and hope. Everything inside that circle feels temporarily claimed by humans. Everything outside belongs to older laws. Predators know this. People know. Predators know this. And everyone behaves accordingly. Fire changed the human relationship with darkness so completely that it is difficult to imagine life before it, because fire does something psychologically powerful. It gives shape to safety, not perfect safety. Let us not become sentimental. A lion does not respect symbolism, but fire creates enough confidence for sleep. And sleep is civilization's quiet foundation. Without rest, nothing larger survives. So someone feeds the flames. Someone checks the wood. Someone argues about who was supposed to gather more. Because fire is beautiful, but also administrative. It needs fuel. Dry fuel, preferably, which means weather gets involved and ruins everyone's mood. Wet wood smokes badly. Smoke enters eyes, lungs, hair, clothing, conversation, and eventually personality. People living around constant fire smelled like smoke because civilization had not yet invented the deeply optimistic idea of removing smells instead of simply accepting them. Smoke preserved things, protected in some ways, destroyed comfort in others. Many human solutions arrive carrying their own punishment. Fire keeps you alive. Fire also burns your child. Fire protects from animals. Fire attracts attention. Fire cooks food. Fire demands labor. Fire creates warmth. Fire requires someone to stay awake. That last part matters, because from that simple need, social structure grows. Who watches the fire tonight? It sounds small. It is not, because whoever watches the fire is responsible for everyone's morning. If they sleep too deeply, cold enters first. If the embers die, dawn begins badly. If something approaches in darkness, they are the first thin line between the group and disaster. Trust begins here, not in speeches, in small, repeated duties. Can I sleep while you remain awake? That may be one of the oldest forms of social contract. And naturally, because humans are humans, someone was bad at it. Someone always falls asleep. Someone always insists they were absolutely awake, actually. And if the fire became smaller, that was part of a very advanced strategy nobody else appreciated. Their name probably survived for years in the tone people used around them. Careless people become stories, and stories around firelight become larger. This is where myth begins. Not from stupidity, from repetition under uncertainty. Imagine a child sitting close to the flames, listening. Adults speak differently at night. During the day, language belongs to tasks. Bring that. Watch there, not that plant. Please stop doing that immediately. But at night, with darkness pressing against the edges of camp, language becomes larger. People remember, people warn, people explain things they cannot prove. A dangerous valley becomes a story, not because anyone planned literature, but because fear preserves information better than instructions. Do not sleep near that ravine. Why? Because once, long ago, the ground swallowed Karu. Now the child remembers. The practical warning survives inside the supernatural shape. This is not primitive thinking. It is efficient memory. Facts fade, fear stays. So places acquire personality. A cave is not just a cave. It is the cave where something happened. A river is not just water. It is where the child was taken. A ridge is where lightning struck. A tree becomes the place where no one sleeps. Landscape becomes emotional architecture. This is how geography turns sacred. A practical danger, repeated enough times, becomes taboo. Do not go there. Do not touch that. Do not speak that name after dark. At first, perhaps, because of risk. Later, because our people do not. And eventually, nobody remembers the first reason, only the seriousness. Temporary solution becomes permanent ritual. Again and again. This is the engine of early human culture. We did this once and survived. Therefore, we do it again. That sentence may have built more civilization than genius ever did. If a hunt succeeds after a painted ritual, the ritual returns. If a storm follows someone breaking a rule, the rule becomes sacred. If a child recovers after an old woman sings over them, the song gains authority. Humans are pattern-hungry creatures. We would rather believe in a dangerous explanation than accept a random one. Randomness is emotionally rude. A spirit can be negotiated with. Luck cannot. So, ritual becomes emotional technology. Before formal religion, before priests, before temples, there were repeated actions against fear. Touch the stone before leaving. Paint the body before hunting. Do not whistle at night. Leave food near the dead. Do not laugh at the sea. Sleep facing the fire. Carry this tooth. Avoid that cave. Sing before the storm. These things may not save anyone physically, but they change the mind. And sometimes the mind is the first battlefield. Fear without ritual spreads. Fear with ritual becomes manageable. A person can say, I did the right thing. Now whatever happens belongs to the world, not only to my failure. That is powerful. It is also the beginning of religion, not theology. Control, or at least the feeling of control. There is a difference. Dreams made this even stranger. Dreams are deeply unhelpful for people trying to maintain a simple understanding of reality. You see someone who has died. You hear a voice from nowhere. You walk in places that do not exist. You wake with grief, fresh as cold morning air. Now, explain that without philosophy. You cannot. So people did what humans always do. They told stories large enough to hold impossible experiences. Maybe the dead visit. Maybe dreams are roads. Maybe sleep is a place. Maybe the cave remembers. Maybe the ancestors watch. Maybe the world is listening. And once that thought enters a culture, it rarely leaves politely because it changes behavior. If the dead are still present, burial matters more. If places remember, movement becomes moral. If animals carry meaning, hunting becomes spiritual. If dreams are messages, sleep becomes dangerous knowledge. Night enlarges everything. A cough sounds like a warning. A branch breaking sounds like intention. A missing person becomes myth faster in darkness than in daylight. And firelight makes faces strange. You know someone by sunlight. By firelight, they become older, wiser, sometimes frightening. An elder telling a story at noon is simply an elder. An elder telling a story at midnight, while sparks rise and shadows move across stone, becomes something else. Authority. Memory. Maybe the first priest was simply the person everyone listened to when the fire was low, not because they claimed power, because they could make fear quieter. That is leadership in its earliest form, not command. Containment. Calm. The person who does not panic when everyone else becomes stupid. Every group knows the value of that person. Sometimes they are wise. Sometimes they are just too tired to be dramatic. Either way, they become important. Children learn belief through adult reactions. If thunder comes and adults fall silent, thunder gains personality. If strong hunters avoid looking toward a certain cave, that cave becomes larger than stone. Fear teaches theology faster than explanation ever could. A child does not need doctrine. They only need to notice that adults whisper here. That is enough. And then there were predators. We should be honest. Nothing creates religion faster than being edible. Imagine hearing something outside the fire, not seeing, hearing, movement in brush, a laugh from something that should not laugh. Hyenas are excellent at making human philosophy less confident. A wolf howl, the deep, coughing roar of a large cat somewhere beyond certainty. Now sit still, listen. Feel how quickly the body remembers it is made of meat. This was ordinary life. People slept while knowing something stronger might be awake nearby. Courage in prehistory may not have looked like heroism. It may have looked like trying to sleep anyway. The fire did not remove fear. It organized it. Inside the light, names, warmth, children, food, story. Outside the light, teeth, weather, strangers, ghosts, and all the things humans invented because uncertainty dislikes emptiness. And because humans are brilliant, we turned fear into community. People gathered around flames not only for protection, but for identity. This is where songs live, where jokes survive, where gossip becomes law, where children hear the stories that explain who we are. We are the people who crossed that river. We are the people who do not eat that animal. We are the people whose grandmother survived the long winter. We are the people who return when the birds return. Identity needs repetition. Fire provided the stage for repetition, night after night, season after season, generation after generation. The same warnings, the same laughter, the same arguments about who should have gathered more wood. This is how culture enters the bones. Not through instruction, through repetition, through hearing the same story until you roll your eyes and then telling it to your own child 20 years later. That is civilization in embryo, not monuments. Repetition, even beauty, changed under firelight. A necklace of shells glows differently. Red ochre on skin becomes dramatic. A scar becomes a story. A handprint in a cave, seen by moving flame, almost moves back. Art in darkness is not decoration. It is conversation with absence. Imagine entering a cave, carrying fire. The smell of smoke thickens. The walls sweat cold. Sound behaves strangely. A torch makes painted animals appear alive for a moment, then vanish again. Now place your hand on the wall. Warm skin against cold stone. Pigment around fingers. Remove the hand. There. Proof. I was here. That is not luxury. That is defiance against disappearance. Humans have always hated vanishing quietly, even before names, especially before names. And perhaps that is why fire mattered beyond warmth. It gave humans a place to resist oblivion together. In daylight, survival scattered people into tasks. At night, fire pulled them back into one circle, one listening body, one shared nervous system, one place where memory could be passed forward. Without that, much of humanity would have dissolved every generation. Fire preserved more than heat. It preserved continuity. It let old people become archives. It let children inherit worlds they had never seen. It let the dead remain present in story. It let temporary solutions become permanent truths. Watch the fire. Do not sleep there. Do not mock the sea. Respect that cave. Remember that name. Return in spring. Stay close tonight. These were not just instructions. They were civilization before architecture. And slowly, something even stranger happened. People began not only to fear the dark, but to imagine intelligence inside it. Not just danger, presence. A storm was not only weather, it was anger. A successful hunt was not only luck, it was permission. A death was not only biology, it was meaning. This is where gods begin, not as kings in the sky, as relationships, with places, with animals, with ancestors, with forces too large to ignore. And still, morning came. That is the practical victory. After all the fear, all the stories, all the listening, dawn returns. Birds begin. Cold changes shape. The fire becomes ash and responsibility. People rise badly. Someone complains. Someone laughs. Someone checks tracks. Someone realizes they should have gathered more wood yesterday and prepares emotionally for the consequences. Life continues. That may be the deepest lesson of firelight. Not that humans conquered darkness. We did not. We simply learned how to sit beside it together. There is a moment, somewhere very deep in human time, when a person picks up a stone and realizes it can become something else. Not just a stone, a knife, a scraper, a spear point, a possibility. And that moment may be one of the most dangerous thoughts our species ever had, because once humans understand that the world can be changed by the hand, nothing stays ordinary for very long. A branch is no longer only a branch. It could be a spear. A bone is not just what remains after hunger. It could be a needle. A shell is not just something left by the sea. It could be beauty. And beauty, as we will discover, is often less practical and far more powerful than people expect. But first, the stone. People like to say, stone tools, as if that phrase explains something. It does not. It sounds neat and educational, like a museum label beside an object a child ignores while asking where the gift shop is. In reality, stone tools meant hands. Hands cut open, hands bruised, hands learning through failure. A sharp blade was not a lucky accident. It was patience. Imagine sitting beside a fire with a piece of flint. You turn it in your hand, study the angle, strike. Too hard, and it breaks badly. Too soft, and nothing useful happens, except disappointment. Too careless, and the edge slices your skin open, because prehistoric education was often direct and deeply committed to consequences. So you try again and again. Children watch. They always watch. An adult making tools is never just working. They are teaching without announcing they are teaching. A child learns which stones matter, which movements are correct, which sounds mean success, which words adults use when the tool breaks unexpectedly, and everyone agrees those words should not be repeated near children. Skill with tools created quiet status. A person who could make a good blade was valuable, not glamorous. Valuable. A sharp edge changes dinner. It changes winter. It changes whether a hide becomes warm clothing or wasted effort. It changes whether a wound becomes clean or infected. A badly made tool is not inconvenience. It is hunger, waiting politely. This is what modern people forget. Most prehistoric objects were not separate from survival. They were attached to the body's future. A broken spear before a hunt was not bad luck. It was a small crisis. A lost needle before winter was not unfortunate. It was an argument with cold. A damaged scraper meant more labor, more time, more exhaustion. Every object had biography. Who made it? Who used it? Who broke it? Who borrowed it and suspiciously forgot to return it? Humanity did not invent drama recently. Ownership existed long before receipts. Who has the right to use the best spear? Can a child touch it? Does the best hunter own it, or the person who made it? If someone dies, does their tool get buried, inherited, broken, or quietly claimed by the cousin who was definitely already looking at it? Objects create politics. Always. And then came composite tools, which sounds harmless until you realize it means humans stopped accepting simplicity. A sharp stone attached to wood. A point fixed with sinew. Adhesive made from heated materials. Now the tool is not one thing. It is a relationship. It requires planning. The spear is made before hunger arrives. The shaft must be found, the stone shaped, the binding prepared, the glue heated. Time must be invested before necessity appears. This changes the mind. It teaches delayed thinking. Civilization later calls this planning. At the beginning, it was simply the desperate hope of not being stupid tomorrow. A hunter checking a spear by firelight is doing something deeply modern, preparing for future inconvenience. And all of this depended on hands. Hands deserve more respect in history. Kings get statues. Hands did the work. Hands scraped hides. Hands carried children. Hands buried the dead. Hands cracked bones for marrow. Hands made the first marks on cave walls. Hands were burned, cut, swollen, stiff with cold, cracked by dryness. Human history is mostly the biography of tired hands. And hands, remember, someone who has shaped stone for years moves differently. The wrist knows before the mind decides. Skill becomes body memory, the same way a mother lifts a child without thinking. A toolmaker strikes stone with memory inside the muscles. That may be one of the oldest forms of inheritance. Not land. Technique. Watch me. Not like that. Again, that is civilization before schools. And tools were never only for hunting. People imagine prehistoric life as endless dramatic animal pursuit, as if every morning involved heroically chasing mammoths with excellent posture. Mostly, life was maintenance, scraping, repairing, drying, cleaning, preparing, waiting. A spear is exciting. Repairing the spear is reality. A hide becomes clothing only after hours of labor so repetitive it would make even modern office work feel adventurous. Scrape, stretch, dry, scrape again. Remove fat, remove flesh. Try not to ruin the useful parts. Try not to think too much about the smell. A well-prepared hide means warmth. A badly prepared one means regret with texture. People who knew how to do this well carried serious importance. Knowledge was stored in hands and passed through irritation, because teaching often sounds like patience and feels like repeated disappointment. No, not like that. If you cut there, we all suffer later. Please stop helping in that particular way. Ancient wisdom. And then, quietly, humans did something unnecessary. They decorated things. This is where the story becomes beautiful. Because survival explains a knife. It does not fully explain a necklace. A shell bead requires effort. You find the shell. You carry it. You shape it. You pierce it. You thread it. None of this helps immediately with hunger, and yet people did it. Again and again. Teeth worn as ornaments. Shells carried far inland from distant coasts. Pigment on skin. Carved objects. Patterns. Marks. Beauty. The first beautiful, useless things. Except they were not useless. That is the trap. Decoration is social technology. A necklace says things words do not. I belong here. I survived something. I am mourning. I am ready for partnership. My people know the sea. I am not invisible. Before writing, before documents, before names carefully recorded in ink, the body became the first biography. What you wore mattered. How you painted yourself mattered. Even scars mattered. A scar says, I survived. A bead says I was chosen. A painted body says, tonight matters. Humans have always wanted to be seen as more than hungry animals. Decoration is rebellion against pure survival. It says, I refuse to be only practical. And perhaps that is the beginning of art, not in philosophy, in the stubborn refusal to let life remain only functional. Imagine red ochre in the hand, powder like earth pretending to be blood, ground carefully, mixed, applied to skin, to tools, to the dead. Why? Because red means something. Blood, life, danger, protection, beauty. Meaning rarely survives because it has one explanation. It survives because it has many. And then there are caves. Caves are strange, even now. Cool air, echoes behaving badly, darkness that feels older than ordinary darkness, stone that remembers water. Imagine entering one carrying fire, not as a tourist, not with a guide and a polite sign requesting silence, but as someone for whom the cave is still unknown. The torch moves. The walls move with it. Shadows become animals. Animals become shadows. The ceiling disappears. Your own breathing sounds like someone else, and somewhere inside that darkness, a person chooses a wall, not any wall. This one. They place a hand there, warm skin against cold stone, pigment blown around fingers, the hand removed. A shape remains, a negative image, a hand made of absence. I was here. That may be the most human sentence ever spoken without words. Not I ruled, not I conquered. Simply, I was here. Think about how intimate that is across time. A handprint from tens of thousands of years ago is not a monument. It is almost an introduction. Hello, I existed. The cave remembers me, even if history does not. This is why prehistoric art feels different from later civilization. A temple belongs to power. A handprint belongs to a person. It is harder to ignore. Animal paintings carry another kind of mystery. Large animals. Hunted animals. Feared animals. Animals painted with attention that feels almost like respect. Why paint them? Hunting magic. Memory. Teaching. Prestige. Spiritual connection. Beauty. Probably several at once. Humans love pretending there is one answer to things clearly made by complicated people. A person can paint an animal because it matters practically and spiritually and emotionally all at once. That is normal. The modern need to separate usefulness and meaning is the strange thing. In deep time, they lived together. The same hand that cut meat made art. The same person worrying about winter could spend precious time making beauty on stone. Because beauty is not the opposite of survival. Sometimes it is part of survival. A group with shared symbols is stronger. A ritual before a hunt calms fear. A painted cave becomes memory. A decorated body creates identity. Art holds people together, and identity matters because strangers existed. People met others, other humans, different ornaments, different tool styles, different faces, different smells. Certainly. Imagine seeing someone wearing shells from a coast you have never seen. Imagine realizing the world is larger than your own map of it. Trade existed before markets. Stone travelled, pigment travelled, shells travelled, stories travelled farther than all of them. And so did ideas. A better knot for binding tools, a sharper scraping method, a ritual, a song, a warning. Technology spreads through trust and envy equally well. Someone sees a better spear and feels admiration. Someone else feels theft. Both are historically common, and with tools came hunting, which people often misunderstand as constant glory. Hunting was frequently waiting, cold waiting, hungry waiting, uncomfortable waiting, while pretending patience is a personality trait. Tracking requires attention most modern people would consider unreasonable. Broken grass, fresh prints, bird behavior, silence where there should be sound, wind direction. The body becomes an instrument. You listen with your skin, and when the moment comes, it is fast and ugly. Blood, noise, fear. Animals do not politely accept symbolism. A large animal can kill very efficiently. A failed hunt means exhaustion. An injured hunter means the group now carries two problems instead of one, and success creates its own burden. Meat is heavy. Blood attracts attention. Butchering takes time. Organs spoil first. Bones must be cracked. Fat must be saved. Nothing useful is casually abandoned. People who say ancient life was simple have never tried carrying half an animal uphill while being judged by relatives. After the hunt comes distribution, the oldest political system in the world. Who gets what? The hunter who risked most, the mother with a child, the elder who remembers drought paths, the person who helped, the person who did not help, and is now suddenly very present. Fairness is never silent. A group that survives together negotiates together. Generosity is admired. Memory is sharp. People remember who shares. People also remember who explains why they could not possibly help this time. Reputation is built on meat and witnessed behavior. And then, after all the blood and labor and argument, someone sits by the fire wearing a bead necklace. This is the part I love most, because it proves something essential. Humans did not wait for comfort to invent beauty. They created beauty inside discomfort, while tired, while hungry, while uncertain, while knowing winter would come. Someone still chose to shape a shell. Someone still painted a body. Someone still made something, not because it was needed, but because it mattered. That is civilization long before cities. The refusal to live only as appetite. Even humor lives here. Imagine the first person proudly showing a new decorative object, and another person looking at it and saying, with ancient, devastating honesty, "It is a little much." Fashion criticism predates agriculture. I am certain of it. Taste is prehistoric. So is vanity. So is the dangerous sentence. Does this make me look powerful? Probably, yes. Probably not. But the attempt itself is eternal. Because survival keeps a body alive. Beauty gives that body a reason to remember being alive. And in the flickering light of caves and campfires, surrounded by stone, blood, winter, and uncertainty, humans chose both. People like to imagine prehistory as a long struggle between humans and nature. Man against beast. Humanity versus winter. The brave little fire against the endless dark. It makes a good story. It is also incomplete, because often the most dangerous thing in the landscape was not the wolf. It was another person. Not always. Let us be fair. Sometimes another person brought help, laughter, marriage, useful gossip, or someone finally willing to admit that your cousin was, in fact, exhausting. But strangers also brought uncertainty. And uncertainty, in human history, is usually just violence, waiting to decide what form it prefers. Before kingdoms, before borders, before official wars and men standing importantly beside maps, conflict was personal, painfully personal. Someone took food. Someone crossed into hunting ground that was understood by at least one side to belong to someone else. Someone insulted someone's brother. Someone left with someone they should not have left with. Someone did not return a tool. Never underestimate the political power of not returning a tool. Civilization later created contracts because apparently humanity needed written proof that yes, you did say you would give it back. But before writing, memory handled everything. And memory is emotional, especially when hunger is involved. Imagine a small group returning to a familiar valley. Not a nation, not an army, just a few families. Children, elders, tools, fire, the ordinary fragile arrangement of survival. They come back to a place with water, good stone, and animal paths they understand. But smoke is already there. Another group. Now everything changes. Not necessarily into violence, but into calculation. Who are they? Do we know them? Are they kin from far enough away to be useful and close enough to be trusted? Are they desperate? Are they stronger? Do they have children? Do they have weapons we have not seen? Did they choose this place because they needed it, or because they think it belongs to them? There is no neutral meeting. Every stranger is both opportunity and threat, and the body knows before language. Adults become quieter. Children are pulled closer without explanation. People look busy while actually watching everything. Weapons are visible, but not too visible. Smiles are offered carefully, like sharp objects wrapped in politeness. Diplomacy, probably, began with extremely tense walking. One person approaches, not the loudest person. That would be a poor design, repeated too often in history. Someone calm, someone whose face says, I am peaceful, but also capable of making this everyone's problem, if necessary. Gifts may be exchanged. A shell, good stone, dried meat. Information disguised as generosity, because every gift asks a hidden question. Are we friends? Do we owe each other now? Will you remember this? Will you misuse this? Gift or trap? That question is ancient, and sometimes the answer was both. Marriage often lived inside that same uncertainty. A person leaving one group to join another could mean alliance, peace, exchange, survival, or resentment, or all of them at once. Human relationships have always preferred complexity. Imagine a young woman leaving with another group. Her family sees alliance. She sees possibility. Someone else sees theft. Someone else sees relief, because frankly there were already too many people sharing one fire. Politics and emotion have always been roommates, and if diplomacy failed, violence did not require armies. Small groups can make conflict feel sharper because there is nowhere to hide. In a city, you can avoid someone. In a camp, the person you hate is 6 feet away, chewing loudly, and somehow still wrong about everything. Resentment becomes architecture. A selfish person cannot disappear into crowds. A violent person poisons every meal. A liar becomes weather. Everyone feels them. This is where law begins, not from philosophy, from irritation. How do you live with people who keep creating problems? This is one of humanity's oldest research projects. Before written rules, there were still rules, very serious ones. Who gets food first? Who may marry whom? Who speaks during conflict? Who decides where the group moves? What happens if someone steals? What happens if someone kills? What happens if someone becomes impossible? And importantly, who gets blamed when things go wrong? Because blame may be older than language. Rules existed because survival required predictability. If food is shared, people trust the group. If food is not shared, people begin privately considering murder. Very bad for morale. But sharing creates another problem. What about the person who never contributes? The one always mysteriously absent during work and dramatically present during eating? Every group has one, probably several. This creates moral tension. Generosity keeps people alive. It also rewards laziness. How much selfishness can a group tolerate before kindness becomes stupidity? That question never left civilization. It just got better clothing. Mockery was one solution. People underestimate mockery. Ridicule can be stronger than law. A selfish person turned into a joke feels the pressure of belonging. Songs, stories, repeated teasing. These are social tools. If everyone laughs when you approach the meat too quickly, eventually you learn patience or move somewhere with less accurate people. Humans use shame because it is efficient and free. Elders often acted as judges, usually with less paperwork and more sighing. An old woman who remembers every previous argument is more powerful than a written archive. She knows who lied 3 winters ago. She knows who broke trust. She knows who should absolutely not be allowed near negotiations unsupervised. Memory is authority, and authority before kings was fragile. There was no throne, no official crown. Leadership was situational. The best tracker led the hunt. The calmest speaker handled strangers. The person who knew healing plants became important during sickness. The strongest carrier mattered during movement. The person who did not panic when everyone else became stupid was practically sacred. Different moments, different leaders. Honestly, this was smarter than many later civilizations. But temporary authority leaves traces. If one person keeps saving everyone, people begin listening sooner. If their children inherit that respect, something subtle begins. Hierarchy grows quietly, not announced, expected. That is how power likes to enter a room, through usefulness, then habit, then inheritance, then suddenly someone owns too many opinions. Control over food created power. Control over ritual created power. Control over memory created power. The person who remembers debts can shape the future. The person who decides what the ancestors would have wanted becomes extremely interesting. This is how priests and rulers are born long before temples, not from divine light, from useful inconvenience. Someone says, I know how things should be done, and everyone else, tired and cold, says, fine, just make sure we survive winter. That is politics. Conflict inside the group could be worse than conflict outside it, because strangers leave, family remains. A violent person inside a small camp is terrifying. You cannot simply ignore them. They know your routines. They know your weaknesses. They sleep near your children. So what do you do? Exile was one answer, a harsh one, perhaps the harshest. To be sent away from the group in deep time was not emotional symbolism. It could be death. No shared fire, no shared food, no one to carry you if you fall, no witnesses, no one to remember your name if morning failed to arrive. Exile meant becoming a stranger to the world. That gave it power. It also made it dangerous, because the exiled do not always disappear. Sometimes they return with revenge. Sometimes they survive elsewhere and become someone else's warning story. Sometimes they remain nearby. Like bad weather, everyone pretends not to notice. And yet groups used exile because sometimes keeping someone was worse. Again, morality becomes sharp when resources are thin. Do we protect the difficult person because they are ours, or protect everyone else from them? There are no clean answers, only consequences. Violence between groups often began in very small ways. A missing animal, a broken agreement, a child hurt, a suspicion. Revenge rarely starts with philosophy. It starts with memory refusing to sit down. Someone killed my brother. Someone took our place. Someone humiliated us. Someone must answer. Revenge feels like justice from the inside. That is why it survives so well, and because There were no states to absorb anger. Anger stayed personal. You knew the face of the person you hated, or thought you did. Sometimes entire generations inherit conflict from stories. We do not trust them. Why? Because my grandfather said, and his grandfather before him. Now a child grows up learning hatred before context. This too is ancient. Humans are excellent at preserving unnecessary hostility, remarkably efficient. But peace also existed. It had to, otherwise nobody survives long enough for history. Peace required maintenance, gift exchange, marriage alliances, shared seasonal gatherings, mutual tolerance, the difficult art of pretending your neighbor's habits are charming instead of deeply suspicious. Trade helped. If another group provides something valuable, stone, shells, pigment, access to coastlines, marriage partners, peace becomes profitable. Profit is a surprisingly strong moral argument. A person wearing shells from far away is not just decorated, they are evidence of connection. Trade creates obligations. Obligations reduce casual murder. Usually, not always, but enough. And still, fear remained, especially at night, because daytime conflict can be negotiated. Night turns everything dramatic. A sound outside camp. Footsteps. Too careful to be animal. Too quiet to be safe. Now the body decides before thought. Wake the others. Reach for the spear. Listen. Wait. This is the oldest courtroom. Silence deciding whether violence enters. And if nothing happens, nobody fully relaxes. Morning will still discuss it. Did you hear it too? Was it them? Should we move? Fear changes roots. Roots become tradition. Tradition becomes territory. Again and again, temporary decisions harden into culture. We do not camp there. We travel this way. We marry those people. We avoid those people. We trust her family. We never trust his family. Why? Because once, long ago, that sentence builds half of civilization. Children absorb these rules without needing proof. Do not cross that river alone. Do not take food before elders. Do not laugh during burial. Do not trust the smiling man from the Western Valley. Children ask why. Adults answer with the ancient parent strategy, because I said so, but with more spiritual decoration. Authority often sounds mystical when it is actually just exhausted. And underneath all of it sits the deepest truth. Humans needed each other and feared each other at the same time. That tension created civilization, not love alone, not violence alone. Dependence. I need you to survive. I also know you are capable of ruining my life. This is marriage, politics, and organized religion in one sentence. To live in a group required constant emotional intelligence. Who is angry? Who is ashamed? Who is pretending not to be afraid? Who should not be spoken to before food? Who can be trusted with children? Who should absolutely not be trusted with sharp tools during arguments? These judgments kept people alive. Social awareness was survival equipment. Charm had evolutionary value. So did patience. So did the ability to apologize before things became archaeological evidence. Even humor helped, especially humor. The person who could make tension lighter without causing insult was valuable. A joke at the right moment can prevent a fight. A joke at the wrong moment creates one. This is still true. Some technologies never improve, and eventually all these invisible systems, trust, blame, leadership, revenge, generosity, punishment, became normal enough that nobody called them systems. They were simply how people lived. Law before law. Government before government. Borders before maps. Kings before crowns. Civilization likes to imagine it invented order. It did not. It inherited older human habits and gave them buildings. The village chief was once just the person everyone listened to during bad weather. The judge was once the elder with the best memory. The prison was once exile. Taxation was once forced food sharing with better branding. Human history is often just old instincts wearing official clothes. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this. Even before civilization, humans already knew how to create heaven and hell for each other. A generous group could make survival feel possible. A cruel group could make safety feel like captivity. A wise leader could save lives. A selfish one could destroy them without ever touching a weapon. Predators were dangerous. Winter was dangerous. Hunger was dangerous. But another human being, with memory, resentment, charm, and motive, that was often the most complicated danger of all. Cold is a very patient enemy. That is the problem with it. A predator announces itself. Teeth are honest. A charging animal has the decency to be dramatic. Even hunger eventually becomes loud enough to demand attention. Cold is quieter. It enters politely. First your hands, then your feet, then your thinking, then your hope. And for most of human history, especially during the Great Ice Age worlds, cold was not weather. It was government. It ruled every decision. Where you slept, what you wore, how far you could travel. Whether a child survived the night, whether an old person woke in the morning, whether a fire was comfort or the last argument between your family and death. People hear Ice Age and imagine one giant frozen postcard. Mammoths walking nobly across white emptiness, while everyone looks heroic and dramatically underdressed. Reality was ruder. Not every place was covered in ice. There were grasslands, forests, coastlines, river valleys, places beautiful enough to kill you, and places ugly enough to save you. But climate touched everything. Winter was not cozy. Winter was management. Imagine waking before sunrise in a world where warmth is expensive. Your breath is visible before your thoughts are. The ground itself feels personally offended by your existence. Animal skins wrapped around you help, but never enough. There is always that one place where cold finds you. At the neck, at the ankle, in the fingers first. Always the fingers first. Hands matter more in winter because cold steals precision. A person who shapes tools beautifully in autumn suddenly struggles to grip, tie, scrape, repair. Drop a tool. Fail to start fire. Cut yourself. Take too long. Winter turns inconvenience into threat. Even water becomes suspicious. A river is not simply water now. It is a trap wearing a peaceful face. Ice lies. Snow hides holes. Wet feet can become a family emergency by evening. A child slipping into freezing water is not an accident. It is a crisis that changes the emotional structure of the entire day. Someone runs. Someone shouts. Someone strips wet coverings away with shaking hands. Someone feeds the fire like prayer. Everyone understands immediately. Survival has become smaller. Just this child. Just this warmth. Just this night. Civilization later becomes very confident about planning centuries ahead. In deep winter, victory was often just reaching morning. Clothing was not fashion. It was portable architecture. A good hide was a wall you could wear. A bad seam was betrayal. A missing needle before winter was the kind of mistake people discussed for years, with a tone suggesting legal punishment should exist. Bone needles changed lives. Tiny object, enormous consequence. The ability to stitch fitted clothing instead of wrapping rough hides badly could decide whether fingers still worked, whether sleep was possible, whether children cried less, whether elders lasted another season. History loves kings. It should respect whoever first looked at bone and thought this could defeat winter. That person deserved monuments. But clothing itself was labor, scraping hides, drying them, smoking them, softening them, repairing them, trying not to let them rot, trying not to let them freeze stiff, trying not to think too much about the smell, though honestly, everyone smelled everything. Wet hide has opinions. And then there was fuel. Wood. Always wood. How much remains? How dry is it? Who forgot to gather enough yesterday? Who confidently said there would be enough and was wrong in the loudest possible way? Firewood is not romantic, but it may be one of the central characters of human history. Without enough fuel, nothing works. Food cannot be cooked. Children cannot be warmed. Sleep becomes shallow. Fear grows teeth. And someone must still go outside to gather more, where the wind waits like a personal insult. Wind deserves respect. Wind is invisible violence. It steals heat without asking. It enters cracks. It turns smoke against you. It makes distance feel longer. It carries scent to animals, to strangers, to things you would prefer remained politely unaware of your existence. A person standing against winter wind learns humility very quickly. Nature becomes persuasive. And then hunger arrives. Winter hunger is different. Summer hunger argues with possibility. There will be berries. Fish may return. Something grows somewhere. Winter hunger is quieter, more mathematical. How much is left? How long until movement returns? Which food must be saved? Who gets the better portion? How honest should we be with children? Fat mattered. This is important. Modern people hear the word fat and make it emotional. Ice Age people made it survival. Fat was warmth. Fat was strength. Fat was winter insurance. Lean meat fills the stomach and still leaves the body unsatisfied. Like a polite lie. Marrow mattered. Organs mattered. Animal fat was treasure. Bones were not casually discarded because inside them was tomorrow. Imagine the sound of marrow being cracked beside a winter fire. Sharp, hopeful, practical. That sound fed families. Large animals, mammoths, bison, giant deer, were not simply prey. They were weather with legs. To hunt something that large was not cinematic bravery. It was collective risk. A successful hunt meant food for many days. Hides, bone, warmth, stories. A failed hunt meant injury, wasted energy, and the deeply unpleasant experience of explaining optimism to hungry relatives. People imagine ancient hunting as dramatic running. Much of it was waiting, cold waiting, watching, tracking, reading the land like a text written by something that wanted you dead. Broken snow, fresh prints, bird behavior, silence where there should be sound. Humans became excellent readers of tiny evidence because large mistakes were expensive. And when the animal finally appeared, the world became immediate. Noise, movement, fear. A mammoth does not care that your people discussed this hunt spiritually. It remains a mammoth, very large, very certain, and afterward comes work, always work. Butchering in cold air, hands going numb, blood steaming, meat heavy to carry, organs needing speed, bones needing tools, everyone tired before the real labor even begins. Success is exhausting, but winter also created something strange: stillness. There were seasons when movement narrowed, people stayed closer to shelter, closer to each other, and closeness creates emotional weather. A small group trapped together too long in bad conditions is one of history's most reliable recipes for irritation. People snore, people complain, people repeat the same story and somehow make it worse each time. Someone always believes they are helping. Someone else knows they are not. A child asks the same question 700 times because winter has reduced entertainment options dramatically. And still, affection survives. This matters. Hardship does not erase tenderness. Sometimes it reveals it. Someone saves the warmest sleeping place for an elder. Someone repairs another person's clothing without making a speech about it. Someone gives the richer piece of food to a pregnant woman and pretends they were not hungry anyway. Love in winter is often logistics, not poetry. Though, honestly, logistics may be the purest poetry. Cold also changes morality. Compassion becomes heavier when resources are thin. Do we feed the injured hunter who may not recover? Do we slow down for the elder who cannot travel fast enough? Do we share equally when equal sharing may mean equal suffering? These are not abstract moral debates. They are immediate. Character appears when there is only enough for almost everyone, and humans did care. Evidence of healed injuries, disabled people surviving, old people living beyond physical usefulness. These things suggest something profound. People chose inconvenience. Someone with a broken leg survived because others fed them. Someone with damaged teeth lived because softer food was shared. Someone too old to hunt remained because memory still had value. Human success was never just strength. It was the decision that weakness belonged to the group. That may be our greatest invention. Not tools, responsibility. But responsibility creates tension. A selfish person in winter becomes unforgettable. The one who hides food, the one who takes more, the one who somehow appears only when meat is served. Civilization later invented bureaucracy, mostly to formalize everyone's existing hatred of that person. Reputation mattered even more in hard seasons. Generosity became visible. Cowardice became visible. Panic became visible. Winter removes decorative personality. It shows structure: who stays calm, who lies, who helps, who becomes dramatic in ways that are impressive but not useful. Cold reveals character because comfort no longer hides it. And then there was darkness. Winter darkness stretches time strangely. Long nights, more firelight, more stories, more memory, more opportunities for fear to become creative. This is where myths deepen. Because when the world outside is hostile and white and silent, the mind becomes louder. Storms feel intentional. Animals feel symbolic. Dreams become messages. The dead feel nearer in winter. Perhaps because silence resembles absence. Perhaps because survival feels thinner. A blizzard can make the world disappear so completely that people naturally begin assigning personality to weather, not because they are foolish, because chaos without meaning is difficult to live beside. So winter becomes spiritual. Ritual before hunting, ritual before travel, ritual for the sick child, ritual for the returning sun. Humans respond to vast indifference by creating ceremony. It helps, even if only emotionally, especially emotionally. Imagine the first winter after a loss. A place at the fire now empty. A voice missing from repeated stories. A tool no one uses. Grief in cold weather feels architectural. It changes the room. People may bury differently in frozen ground. They may delay. They may return later. Even death obeys climate, and memory becomes seasonal. We remember him when snow comes. We remember her when birds return. This is how time is measured before calendars, in absences. And then, slowly, something extraordinary happens. Humans adapt so well to hardship that children born into it call it normal. A child raised in cold does not think, what a difficult ice age environment. They think, this is winter. This is how we live. This is why grandmother hates wet boots. This is why father checks the sky like it insulted him personally. Hardship becomes ordinary if it arrives before language. That may be tragic. It is also useful. Humans normalize almost anything. Give us enough repetition, and we will call catastrophe tradition. And from those traditions came knowledge. Migration routes, seasonal camps, animal timing, wind patterns, safe caves, dangerous ice. Which valley traps cold? Which river lies? This knowledge was wealth, not symbolic wealth, actual survival wealth. The person who knew where food remained during the worst winter was more valuable than gold centuries before gold became emotionally overrated. And still, despite cold, hunger, fear, and the deeply offensive behavior of winter itself, people made beauty. They still wore beads, still painted, still carved. Because beauty in hard times is not luxury. It is resistance. A necklace in winter says, I am still a person. Not just a creature trying not to freeze. That may be the real story of the Ice Age. Not humans conquering nature. That is too clean. It was negotiation. Daily, exhausting negotiation. With cold, with hunger, with each other, with fear, with hope, with the humiliating fact that no matter how clever you are, snow does not care. And still we endured. Not because we were fearless, because we were stubborn. Because someone gathered more wood. Because someone remembered the old route. Because someone stayed awake. Because morning, even in winter, was worth trying for. For most of human history, home was not a building. It was movement. A valley visited in spring. A cave used only when winter became rude. A coastline where shellfish were good and arguments were better. A river crossing where your grandmother always complained. Home was not walls. It was return. People left. People came back. People left again. That rhythm lasted for tens of thousands of years. And then, very slowly, so slowly, that nobody living inside it would have called it a revolution. Something dangerous happened. Humans began to stay. At first, it probably looked small. That is how history works. The future usually arrives disguised as convenience. Maybe there was a place where wild grain grew thick enough that leaving felt inefficient. Maybe fish returned so reliably that moving started to feel like unnecessary suffering. Maybe children were easier to raise where the land was familiar. Maybe elders were tired. Never underestimate the political influence of tired elders. Someone, somewhere, looked at one place and thought, perhaps we could remain here a little longer. That sentence changed everything. Because staying creates problems movement can avoid. When you move, waste stays behind. Bad neighbors become somebody else's problem. Arguments cool with distance. But when you stay, everything accumulates. Food scraps, bones, smells, resentment, memory. And once humans stayed longer, they discovered something very modern. Your neighbors are now permanent. This was not automatically progress. Let us be honest. Agriculture is often introduced like a heroic triumph. Humanity bravely discovers farming and marches confidently towards civilization, taxes, and eventually deeply unnecessary meetings. But from the inside, it may have felt more like this. Congratulations! You now have more food to worry about. Because hunting and gathering creates uncertainty, yes, but it also creates freedom. If food disappears, you move. If the river changes, you move. If your neighbors become unbearable, which they absolutely will, you move. Movement is difficult. Staying is commitment. And commitment is just difficulty with paperwork. The first people experimenting with plants were not trying to invent civilization. They were solving practical problems. Seeds fall, plants return, people notice. Someone drops seeds near camp. Later, food appears where it is useful. Interesting. Someone protects certain plants. Someone clears around them. Someone waits. Someone becomes emotionally invested in dirt. And now we have farming. The beginning sounds almost embarrassingly ordinary. No trumpet, no dramatic speech, just a person staring at a patch of ground with dangerous optimism. This could work. Sometimes it did. But farming asks strange things from people. It asks patience. It asks repetition. It asks trust in a future you cannot yet see. Hunter-gatherer life dealt with what existed now. This animal, this season, this fire. Farming asks you to believe in months you have not reached yet. You place labor into soil and hope reality cooperates. This is either wisdom or madness, depending entirely on rainfall. And once food can be stored, human psychology changes. Stored food is power. This may be one of the most important shifts in history. Before, wealth moved. It was skill, memory, tools, beauty carried on the body. Now wealth can sit in one place. Grain in storage, food in containers, animals kept nearby, something visible, something stealable. And the moment something becomes stealable, humans become extremely creative. Storage creates anxiety. Who protects it? Who controls it? Who decides distribution? Who worked more? Who worked less? Who is borrowing and who is stealing with excellent excuses? A full storage pit creates the same emotional energy as a modern shared bank account. Nobody relaxes. Property begins here. Not in philosophy. In suspicion. This is mine. Those 3 words have started more trouble than most invading armies. Before, territory existed through memory and return. Now ownership becomes physical. This field, this house, this grain, this goat, this wall, and walls matter. A wall is an emotional statement made of mud and labor. A wall says, I intend to be here tomorrow. A wall says, please stop entering uninvited and pretending it was an accident. Permanent shelter changes the human mind. A camp is flexible. A house is a declaration. Now roofs matter. Repairs matter. Corners matter. People with houses become deeply invested in corners. Objects gather. Children have places to hide. Arguments have walls to travel through. Privacy begins trying to exist. And dirt becomes a full-time enemy. Human civilization may simply be one long response to the discovery that if you stay in one place, things become filthy. Villages appear this way, not as glorious beginnings, as repeated inconvenience, one house near another, because family, because safety, because shared labor, because leaving feels harder now. Then another house, then paths between them, then disputes about those paths. Then someone says your goat is absolutely not supposed to be there. And now society has arrived. Neighbors create politics faster than kings do. Who owns that land? Who gets water first? Who repairs the shared wall? Who keeps borrowing tools and returning them with mysterious new damage? Civilization invents bureaucracy, mostly to formalize ancient annoyance. Staying also changes family life. More children survive, which sounds beautiful until you realize more children also means more mouths, more labor, more noise, and dramatically fewer quiet evenings. Population rises, pressure rises. Now the village must produce more. Now work becomes seasonal and relentless. Plant, protect, harvest, store, repeat. This is not romantic. It is exhausting. A hunter can fail spectacularly. A farmer often fails slowly, and slow failure is crueler. Too much rain, too little rain, insects, rot, animals eating what you believed was your future. Nothing teaches humility like watching a goat destroy your plans. Agriculture creates planning. It also creates chronic stress. And because fields tie people to land, conflict changes shape. A mobile group can avoid trouble. A farmer cannot easily walk away from planted months. Now, defense matters. Now, raids matter. Now, violence becomes organized. If your food sits in one place, someone else can come take it. Congratulations. You have invented both civilization and the reason for walls. And walls eventually require watchers. Watchers require authority. Authority requires explanation. Explanation becomes hierarchy. The person controlling stored food becomes important. The person deciding who eats first becomes very important. The person claiming spiritual approval for those decisions becomes suspiciously important. This is how chiefs, priests, and rulers stop being temporary and start becoming permanent. Leadership used to follow usefulness. Best hunter today, best tracker tomorrow. Now leadership can attach itself to storage, to land, to inheritance. Your father controlled the grain, now you do. Power learns to sit down. And once power sits down, it rarely volunteers to leave. Inequality begins looking normal. Some houses larger, some storage fuller, some families better fed, some people giving orders they seem strangely excited about. Hierarchy becomes architecture. And then the dead stop traveling. Before, burial often moved with the group. Now, the village stays. The dead stay too. This ground holds our people. This field fed them. This wall knew them. Land becomes heavier, not just useful, sacred. Now leaving is harder, because leaving means abandoning more than shelter. It means abandoning memory. Religion changes too. Before, spirits followed animals, storms, caves, seasons. Now gods begin noticing fields. Rain matters differently. when your survival depends on grain in one place. Harvest becomes prayer. Fertility becomes politics. The sky becomes personal. This is excellent news for priests, less excellent for everyone else. And perhaps the greatest irony is this: humanity spent tens of thousands of years learning how to survive nature, only to invent a system where the most common complaint became other humans and their wheat. This is progress. Questionable, but historically consistent. The first farmers did not know they were creating cities. They were trying not to starve next winter. That is all. History usually grows from ordinary fear, not grand ambition. Just people trying to make tomorrow slightly less dangerous than today. A safer food source, a stronger wall, a place for children, a reason not to keep walking. And from that, civilization rises. Kings, taxes, writing, arguments about property, all from one quiet thought: maybe we should stay here. And like most human decisions, it solved one problem beautifully and created 10 others that are still with us now. At first, the village feels like success. There is food nearby. There are walls. Children survive more often. You know where you will sleep next month, which for most of human history would have sounded like suspicious luxury. From the outside, it looks like progress, and in many ways, it was. But civilization has a habit of solving one problem by quietly inventing 3 worse ones and then asking for gratitude. Because once humans stayed, stored food, and built permanent settlements, a new question appeared. Who controls the surplus? Not who finds food. That was the old world. Who controls food that already exists? That is the new one. And this is where history becomes very familiar. Because the moment extra grain sits in storage, someone begins standing near it with opinions. At first, it sounds practical. Someone must organize. Someone must count. Someone must decide what is saved for winter, what is planted, what is shared. Reasonable, necessary, dangerous, because control over survival is never just administration. It becomes power. The person who controls food does not need to be the strongest. They only need everyone else to be hungry enough to listen. This is how inequality stops being an accident and becomes architecture. In a moving world, wealth was difficult to hoard. You could own tools, skill, ornaments, memory, but you could not easily own too much landscape. Try carrying a field. Agriculture changed that. Now land matters. Now storage matters. Now walls matter. Now ownership can sit still and grow. One family has more grain. Another controls the best water. Another somehow always ends up making decisions for everyone and calling it responsibility. This is not yet a king, but kings are already listening from the future. The first inequalities probably did not arrive with dramatic cruelty. They arrived with reasonable explanations. I am only protecting the grain. I am only organizing the work. I am only making sure everyone survives winter. History loves those sentences. They are often true. They are also often the beginning of someone becoming extremely difficult to remove. Power likes to arrive wearing practicality. Soon some houses are larger. Some families eat better. Some children grow stronger. Some backs bend more than others. And slowly, people stop asking whether this arrangement is temporary. That is the dangerous part. Humans normalize almost anything if it repeats long enough. Give inequality enough seasons, and it becomes tradition. Give tradition enough authority, and it becomes morality. Now the poor are not just unfortunate, they are supposed to be poor. Now the powerful are not just lucky, they are supposed to lead. Civilization becomes very efficient at turning convenience into destiny. And then comes one of history's least loved inventions, taxes. Not immediately, perhaps, but the emotional ancestor of taxes appears the moment someone says, "For the good of everyone, part of this belongs elsewhere." And sometimes that is true. Walls must be repaired, water systems maintained, protection organized. But humans have never met a system of shared contribution that could not eventually become suspicious. Ask any farmer. Imagine working a field, back bent, hands cracked, weather behaving badly, children needing food, animals behaving like anarchists, insects holding a personal grudge against your happiness. You work for months, planting, protecting, waiting, watching the sky like it owes you money. Finally, harvest arrives. Relief. Food. Proof that suffering briefly had a point. Then someone arrives and says, part of it must go elsewhere. For the temple, for protection, for the ruler, for reasons. This is the moment many civilizations truly begin. The moment a tired person holding grain says, "Absolutely not." And history replies, "Actually, yes." Now labor changes too. Hunter-gatherer life was hard, but varied. Movement, tracking, repair, adaptation. Agricultural labor can become repetitive in a way the human soul finds personally insulting. Field, again. Same field, same motion, again, again, again. Civilization often means doing the same exhausting thing until your grandchildren inherit the privilege. Routine creates stability. It also creates hierarchy. Someone works the land. Someone owns the land. These are not always the same person. That sentence built empires. And eventually, where ownership hardens enough, slavery appears. Not always immediately, but the logic is already there. If land creates wealth and labor creates harvest, controlling labor becomes irresistible. Human beings have repeatedly looked at other human beings and thought, perhaps you could do my difficult work forever. This remains one of our worst ideas. At first, it may look like debt, obligation, captured enemies, family inheritance. You owe, you remain. You work, freedom becomes negotiable. Civilization makes this possible because permanence makes people trackable. A moving person is harder to own. A settled person becomes visible, countable, taxable, controllable. And then writing arrives. People like to imagine writing emerging from poetry and wisdom. Often it begins with grain, records, storage. Who owes what? How much? To whom? Humanity invents one of its greatest intellectual achievements, largely because someone did not trust someone else near a pile of wheat. Honestly, fair enough. Writing changes memory. Before, elders carried law. Now clay tablets do. Before, reputation lived in voices. Now it becomes official, recorded, harder to argue with, much easier to resent. A village becomes a town. A town becomes administration. Administration becomes civilization's favorite hobby. Rules, obligations. Someone somewhere discovering that counting other people's resources is strangely satisfying. And then cities appear, not as shining miracles, as crowded, noisy experiments. Animals close to humans, waste close to everything, disease discovering exciting new opportunities, smoke, markets, children, arguments, and neighbors, always neighbors. Civilization's greatest invention may be the ability to be annoyed by someone you have never formally met. Cities intensify everything. Wealth becomes visible. Poverty becomes harder to ignore and easier to normalize. Religion becomes organized. Temples rise. Gods receive architecture. Priests receive confidence. A person who once interpreted dreams beside a fire now owns robes and opinions, because once survival depends on rain, harvest, and flood cycles, the invisible becomes politically useful. Who speaks for the gods matters very much if the gods control bread. The temple becomes spiritual center, storage center, economic center, and social center. An excellent arrangement for priests. Kings emerge here too, not always from glory, often from logistics. Someone must organize labor. Someone must defend walls. Someone must manage water. Someone must be blamed when everything goes wrong. Leadership hardens, then inherits itself, then decorates itself. Now the chief is not just useful, he is sacred. Now obedience becomes moral. Now power has costume design. The king says he protects order. The people say, hopefully. The tax collector says, definitely. And somewhere, a farmer quietly hates all of them. This is civilization, a beautiful machine built from trust and resentment. But something else changes in cities. Loneliness. This sounds strange. How can loneliness increase when people are surrounded by more people because small groups know you? Cities know your function. In a camp of 30 people, your grief is visible. In a city of thousands, you can disappear while standing in the market. Civilization creates anonymity. Useful, terrifying. A person can reinvent themselves. A person can also be forgotten more efficiently. Before, belonging was intimate. Now belonging becomes institutional. You belong because of law, class, occupation, debt. Different, not always better. And still, civilization offers beauty too. Let us be fair. Monuments rise. Art grows larger. Stories are written instead of only remembered. Architecture becomes ambition made visible. Someone looks at a pile of stone and thinks, yes, this should be much taller. Humanity respects this impulse more than it should. Temples, palaces, walls, roads, systems that would have seemed impossible beside Paleolithic firelight, all built on the same old foundation. Someone stayed awake. Someone shared food. Someone enforced rules. Someone remembered. Someone buried the dead. Someone decided temporary order should become permanent. Civilization is not new. It is old instincts wearing stone. And perhaps the cruelest irony is this. People often imagine civilization as escape from hardship. But many ordinary people may have worked harder, eaten worse, lived sicker, and enjoyed less freedom than some of the foragers before them. Progress is complicated. A farmer with a field may envy remembered freedom. A hunter may envy stored grain. Each life contains what the other fears and desires. That is the human pattern. We romanticize what we do not currently have. The first city dweller probably dreamed of silence. The last hunter probably dreamed of certainty. Both were right. Neither got peace. And still civilization spread. Because security, even imperfect security, is seductive. because parents want children to survive, because walls feel safer than open darkness, because grain in storage looks like hope. People will accept extraordinary burdens if they believe tomorrow becomes less fragile. That belief built history, even when history behaved badly. And perhaps the final cruelty is this. Civilization did not remove fear, it reorganized it. Before, people feared winter, predators, starvation, strangers. Now, they also feared debt, authority, failure at scale, the anger of rulers, the anger of gods interpreted by rulers, being owned, being forgotten. The dark forest became the crowded street. Different danger, same heartbeat. We did not become less afraid. We simply built better walls around our fear and called it progress. The strange thing about modern life is how often it pretends to be new. New technology, new stress, new loneliness, new relationships, new forms of fear. And yes, the furniture has changed. The glowing screens are certainly new. The emails are a crime against the human spirit. But underneath all of it, under the buildings, the traffic, the passwords, the carefully scheduled meetings nobody wanted something very old, is still sitting there. You, not the modern version, the older one. The person built for firelight, not fluorescent light. The person who still reacts to darkness faster than reason. The person who still wants belonging more than logic. The person who can feel rejection like physical danger. The person who still understands, somewhere deep in the body, that being left outside the group might mean death. Because for most of human existence, it did. We like to think civilization changed us completely. It did not. It reorganized the furniture, that is all. You are still prehistoric. You wake in the night and feel fear before explanation. That is ancient. A sound in the dark, a message not answered. Silence where there should be reassurance. The body reacts first, always, because your nervous system was not designed for abstract stress. It was designed for immediate problems. Predator, storm, child missing, smoke where it should not be. Now it must handle taxes, social embarrassment, and the emotional terrorism of someone typing, "We need to talk." It does its best. Poorly, sometimes. But, honestly, given the circumstances, admirably. Anxiety is often just prehistoric software running modern nonsense. Your brain hears unpaid bills and responds like there is a wolf near camp. Biologically, this is embarrassing. Emotionally, it is consistent. And belonging nothing reveals how ancient we are faster than belonging. A person can have food, shelter, safety, and still feel broken because they are excluded, ignored, rejected, unwanted. Why? Because for tens of thousands of years, social exclusion was not emotional inconvenience. It was survival risk. To be alone meant cold, hunger, danger. Your body remembers that, even if your apartment has heating and disappointing Wi-Fi. This is why embarrassment feels absurdly powerful. Why shame can feel physical. Why being left out of a conversation can somehow ruin an entire day. It sounds irrational. It is prehistoric. The body is asking a very old question. Am I still one of us? That question has shaped marriages, wars, religions, and suspiciously inspirational social media captions. Am I still one of us? Even love remains ancient. Modern romance likes costumes, apps, messages, expensive coffee, strategic emotional confusion, but underneath it is still the same old arrangement. I want you near me. I want to know if you will stay. I want to believe I matter in your future. That is not modern. That is the fire circle. Someone shifting closer in the cold. Someone saving the better piece of food. Someone noticing your silence before you speak. Love is still the redistribution of discomfort. We just added restaurants. Jealousy is prehistoric. So is loyalty. So is the human tendency to fall in love with someone who is clearly a bad idea, and then act surprised when history repeats itself. Ancient people did this too, probably with fewer text messages and more eye contact across dangerous distances. Children have not changed much either. A child asks the same question repeatedly, touches the dangerous thing immediately after being told not to, wants fairness with extraordinary moral passion, unless fairness is inconvenient for them personally. This is not a flaw. This is continuity. A prehistoric child and a modern child would recognize each other instantly, mostly by mutual refusal to sleep when requested. Parenthood remains one of humanity's oldest forms of organized chaos. You protect, you worry, you imagine danger before it arrives. You become capable of irrational strength and irrational overreaction within the same afternoon. A parent watching a child sleep is standing in one of the oldest emotional positions in history. Hope mixed with terror. Nothing modern about it, even beauty. Our need for it remains unchanged. People still decorate themselves, still wear symbols, still choose objects that say, I belong, I survived, I matter, I am desired, I am mourning, I am not invisible. The shell necklace became the wedding ring. The ochre became lipstick. The cave handprint became the profile picture. Different tools, same message. Please remember that I was here. This is one of humanity's deepest prayers. Not save me. Remember me. We still build monuments for exactly this reason. Sometimes they are buildings. Sometimes they are children. Sometimes they are stories. Sometimes they are very questionable tattoos. But always the same instinct. Absence terrifies us. We want traces. We want proof. The prehistoric person pressing a hand against cavestone and the modern person posting a photograph before a sunset are not so different. Both are saying, I existed. Look, even our politics are ancient. Civilization gave us governments, constitutions, elections, and the exhausting miracle of public opinion. But underneath, tribal instinct still runs the machinery. Us, them, who belongs, who threatens resources, who can be trusted, who must be watched. Humans remain very vulnerable to simple group stories. We like complexity only until fear arrives. Then we become prehistoric immediately. Protect the group, distrust the outsider, share with our own, explain suffering by assigning intention. This is old, very old, sometimes useful, often dangerous. The same brain that once protected a small band around a fire now argues on the internet with strangers about things neither side fully understand. Evolution did not prepare us for comment sections. That was clearly malicious design by the universe. Ownership, too, remains emotional. People fight over land, inheritance, objects, parking spaces, and occasionally the correct side of a bed, with a seriousness that would impress ancient ancestors. Mine. That word still carries prehistoric electricity. This is mine, my room, my child, my time, my people, my story. Property is not only economic, it is emotional territory. That is why arguments about small things become large. A borrowed object returned damaged can trigger emotions that sound absurd until you remember that ownership began with stored food and winter survival. The nervous system still treats fairness like life and death. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is just your favorite mug. The body rarely distinguishes elegantly. And then there is work. Modern people often fantasize about simpler lives before civilization, usually while sitting indoors with climate control and snack access. Let us be cautious. Prehistoric life was hard. Cold, danger, hunger, infection, uncertainty. But modern life created its own beautiful absurdities. Many people now spend years sitting still, staring at symbols, slowly exchanging spinal health for economic survival. This would be very difficult to explain to a hunter-gatherer. You do what all day? I move numbers, and this keeps you alive? Apparently, civilization specialized survival. Useful, also deeply strange. The body still wants movement, sunlight, trust, sleep, near natural rhythms. Instead, it often receives stress, blue light, suspicious food, and an email marked urgent that absolutely is not urgent. Then we wonder why anxiety exists. Your nervous system is trying to run Paleolithic software inside a civilization built by people who thought fluorescent lighting was emotionally acceptable. Be patient with yourself. You are adapted for rivers and firelight, not performance reviews. Even grief remains unchanged. We still lose people and find language insufficient. We still keep objects, still revisit places, still smell memory before we think it, still hear a voice in a crowd that is not there, still want one more conversation, still negotiate with absence like primitive theologians. Death may now happen in hospitals instead of caves, but the emotional structure is the same. Someone was here, now they are not. The mind refuses this information. Grief is prehistoric, because love is prehistoric. No technology has solved that, and perhaps it should not. Some pain is proof. The dead still shape geography. A house feels different. A chair becomes too loud in its silence. A road carries memory. We still build sacred places around absence. Cemeteries, memorials, photographs, names on walls. We are still placing stones and saying, this person mattered. Nothing changed there. Religion survives because uncertainty survives. People still want meaning when randomness feels insulting. Why this illness? Why this loss? Why now? Science explains mechanism. The heart often asks for narrative. Humans continue speaking into mystery, because mystery keeps answering with weather. Even people who claim not to believe often create rituals. Lucky objects, repeated phrases, private superstitions. Touch the door twice. Sit in the same seat. Call before the trip. Text when you arrive. We smile at this, but it is ancient. We are still making small agreements with chaos. Please let the people I love return safely. I will do this if you do that. The gods may have changed names. The behavior did not. And loneliness, perhaps civilization's quiet epidemic, is also prehistoric. Because we were built for small groups, repeated faces, known voices. Not for crowds without intimacy, not for thousands of weak connections, and no one who notices when our voice sounds wrong. Many people today are surrounded and unseen. That would make no sense to an ancient camp. Visibility was automatic then. Now it must be earned. Scheduled. Requested. No wonder people are tired. To be known is still one of the deepest forms of safety. Not admired. Known. Someone who notices. Someone who says, "You are quieter today." Someone who remembers your fear before you explain it. That is home. It always was. And perhaps that is the final irony of civilization. After building cities, empires, religions, economies, philosophies, and customer service hotlines, humans are still searching for what existed around the first fires: warmth, food, safety, meaning. Witness: someone to stay awake while we sleep. Someone to remember us if morning does not arrive. That is all. That was always all. The scale changed. The need did not. Take away the buildings. Take away the roads. Take away the passwords, the taxes, the glowing screens, the carefully managed schedules. Leave only the night. Leave only the fire. Leave only the people you love. There. That person sitting quietly in the dark, listening for danger, hoping for morning. That person is still you. They always were.